The Nike Next% version 1 and 2 have been a staple in many runners' racing shoe rotations, and with so many people finding it hard to come by now, what other alternatives do we have? Well, I think this one might come very darn close. It's got very similar characteristics, it's lighter than the version 2, so what's the difference? Well, bar the obvious material differences, I think there are two major things that make this one different to the version 2 Vaporfly, but overall they are very similar. Now, when I produced my first impressions video of this shoe, a lot of you guys said, yep, this is my favourite shoe. It was last year and it is now my #1 racing shoe. I can absolutely see why. After another workout in the shoe this week, I can confirm that this thing is going to be brilliant, and I'm really excited to race in it for the first time this weekend. So let's start off with the similarities of these two shoes. Both of them have a 40mm stack height in the heel and 32 in the forefoot, meaning we have a 8mm heel to toe drop. The version 1 came in my UK size 13, around 246 grams. This one is more around 278. In my UK size 13, this one is 257 grams. One of the strong characteristics in the Next% version 1 and version 2 is a very streamlined design. It was very sleek. It felt like you were slipping your foot into a torpedo, and it felt really, really good. Now, I'm not saying it was necessarily a narrow shoe, but it certainly wasn't wide and accommodating. And this was kind of at the time when the super shoes were bursting onto the scene, and it was a little bit more niche, whereas now these days super shoes are being made slightly wider to accommodate a bigger audience, and so therefore it takes away from that kind of sleek feeling. Now, for me personally, I'm always looking to slip my foot into something that is comfortable, but it doesn't need to provide the most comfort. It's got to get me around the distance mentally feeling good. I've got to feel like I've got a nice lightweight racer on my foot, but it does have to be relatively streamlined. I do want to feel like I'm not running with boats on my feet. It's kind of why I kind of steer clear from some of those bigger super shoes, exactly why I'm not particularly getting on with the Vaporfly version 3 at the moment. That one's a great shoe, but it really does feel like there's a lot of shoe on your foot. Whereas this one, this is very similar to those Vaporflies. Really, really nice. Again, I'm not necessarily going to say it's a narrow shoe. A lot of you guys have said it's narrow. I found it very similar to the Vaporfly, where I slip my foot in and my feet are nice and contained, nice and secured. I don't necessarily have any room to splay my toes, but I feel comfortable in there, and it feels really good. So this is very, very similar to that. I would go as far as saying the upper on this shoe is a little bit more similar to the version 1 Vaporweave. It's a little bit tighter around the foot. It feels nice and secure, and there's not a lot of wiggle room. If you see in the version 2 here, the upper, I wasn't a huge fan of this upper. It does move around quite a bit there. I used to find there was quite a lot of baggy material on this. I still find it really good, and I still race in the version 2s a lot, but I did find that to be a bit of a downside when they upgraded in the version 2. But as I said, this one is really nice feeling, going back to that sort of version 1 sort of tightness over the top of the foot, feeling really, really secured. And I am just going to play you a very quick clip from this week's workout that I did in this shoe in preparation for the race this weekend. It's exactly what my thoughts are on the Next%, and I'm thinking exactly the same thing with these. 5:28 per mile for that first one. God, these shoes, they really work for me. I'm not trying to say that the shoes are making this happen. I appreciate fitness is there, but you know, sometimes when you find a shoe that works for your gait cycle, for your biomechanics, for the way you run, that 5 minutes was epic. I felt like I was floating. And those sentiments and what I exactly thought about the Next% when I used to run in those, they just work so well for me. And I did have some good success in the Vaporfly version 1s. The 2s were not that great. I always found the version 1s to be quite bulky, but I did set some good PBs in them. And the version 3, I just feel like there's just so much shoe there. It just doesn't work for me. I do very much like to slip my foot into a shoe that's a little bit more like a torpedo. But the plate placement is an interesting one in these. Both of these run close to the ground. So you can see here, it scoops down here. The distinguishment is from the blue foam to the white foam. The plate runs between there, but then as you can see, it cuts up quite aggressively under the midfoot area, which is why I've always wondered if that's why you get a bit of a feeling under the arch in those first few runs before it sort of settles down and then it scoops up there. So we've got quite an aggressive spoon-shaped carbon plate in there. That combined with the Zoom X foam, that's where the magic is at. That's why this has been such a successful shoe. Now, with the plate placement being as it is, it does have a quite aggressive feeling. It's nice because with the more foam under the foot, you do get a very nice sort of comfortable feeling when you do land, but with the plate closer to the ground, it does slap a little bit more. It's a little bit noisier, but also it gives a more aggressive snap off feeling when you do go through that gait cycle. When you land and toe off, it does feel like it really springs you, and that's what's always drawn me to the Next%. I do love shoes that have a plate placement slightly higher. You then start to get that balance of a little bit less squish underfoot, but a little bit more squish as your foot hits the floor, and so you get a different sensation sensation. The Alphafly is a good example, and the Saucony Endorphin Elite, where the plate placement is either in the middle of the foam or maybe even just slightly up. And of course, Asics have done a great example where they've got the edge in the sky, one of them being a plate placement slightly lower and one of it slightly higher. And it just caters for different runners. Different runners prefer different things, and this type of style really works for me. And so as you can see in the Puma here, we have exactly the same thing, a low to the ground plate placement here. But what you'll see right here is a less aggressive scoop up under the arch area. So it's a little bit more neutral here, just a gentle slant down and then an aggressive curl up at the end. And it has definitely a more natural feel to it. That coupled with the midsole, which I mentioned was the other difference, this feels a lot squishier than the Next Percent version 2. I'm not going to say the version 1 because I noticed a difference between version 1 and version 2 foam. Version 2 foam definitely felt more plasticky, a little bit less responsive, still good, but not as good as version 1. I feel like this is much more on a par with version 1 than anything else I've ever tried. Now this squish here underfoot gives a really comfortable sensation because of course the plate is lower to the ground, but because it's lower to the ground I still feel like I get that aggressive pop off. That compared with the fact that the weight is less than this than the version 2 makes it just to be the ultimate package. It's around about sort of 10 grams heavier, 10 or 11 grams heavier than version 1 in my size, but as version 1s are absolutely nowhere to be seen now and we just can't get our hands on them, I feel like this has definitely come up and stepped up to be a really good replacement for the version 2 and, if I'm honest, version 3. Now a quick note on version 3, because I'm sure a lot of you are wondering why I'm not dropping that into the comparison. Version 3 was a shoe that I never particularly got on with. It was nice when it came out, it was nice to feel that the Zoom X midsole foam had gone back to a bit more squishier like version 1, but what I found, and again I think what a lot of you guys found as well, judging by some of the comments I've seen on some of my videos over the years, is that the more you run in that shoe, it starts to feel a bit mushier, you lose a bit of responsiveness, and it doesn't quite propel you in the way that the version 1 and 2 does. What we found with that one again is they made the forefoot slightly wider, just catering for a wider audience, which is really frustrating. I kind of feel like I understand that with daily trainers, you want to get more people into the sport of running, there's lots of people to market your shoes to. I get it, make your daily trainers a bit bigger. It's not great for all of us, but I understand why you would do it. But when it comes to racing shoes, especially for the people that really enjoyed those early super shoes where they were a little bit wobbly, a little bit unstable, but they were aggressive, just kind of feel like everything is now being adapted slightly, and that was no different in the 3. So as I said, the back of the shoe was still relatively thin, and I feel like for a heel striker it wouldn't necessarily be the greatest of shoes, but the forefoot area was quite a wide pad, and the more you ran in it, as I said, the longer you went on. I did a 16-mile marathon pace effort run in that shoe. I had really bad plantar fascia issues after that, and I just felt the longer it went on, the mushier it got, so I never really picked that shoe up again. Now of course there are a lot of other shoes that have a low plate placement. There are plenty of them out there. One of my favorites was the Endorphin Pro 3. That again was another great successor to the Vaporfly, because I knew, and just like everything, like this one as well, everything will be superseded at some point and we won't be able to get our hands on these older models. But again, the Pro 3 is starting to disappear, and so the Pro 4 for me once again was a slight disappointment. Lower plate placement, but the foam and the plate just did not work in that shoe. What we've got to understand is when we're talking about racing shoes with carbon plates, regardless of the plate placement, regardless of anything else, the foam and the plate has to work together to provide an effective package. And what we're seeing in both of these two shoes, this one obviously being the original, this one has come in and done a really great job. The foam in this just works so well with the plate. Effectiveness of it is clear to be seen when you're running in it. It just feels so good. And as I said, a few of you mentioned a break-in period. I'll be honest, the second run felt just as good as the first run, but I really am starting to notice the squish in this shoe, and it is so damn comfortable. So to answer the question, is this going to be a good replacement for the Next Percent? Because of course I guarantee you we won't be able to find the Next Percent version 2 anywhere in a year or so's time. We might be able to on places like eBay and StockX and stuff, but there will literally be no shops stocking it whatsoever. I was super lucky to pick up a pair last year. It was just such a random find. A few of you alerted me to it and I grabbed a pair. It was brilliant to snag a fresh pair. Still got 60 miles in those, but I guarantee that will stop happening now. So yeah, absolutely, this is a great replacement. I think if you enjoyed the Vaporfly, this is 100% a version to try. What I will say is, a few of you mentioned, and I found this as well, stock on this shoe can be pretty hard to find. There's not a lot of them about. So if you genuinely are considering picking up a pair of these, they're well worth it. I would jump on it as soon as you see a new drop launched. Of course, the real test for me is going to be this weekend after my 5-mile race. So I encourage you, if you're interested in finding out how they got on there. Do stay tuned next week. I will drop a race vlog early next week and I'll mention in that race vlog how I got on with the shoes. Otherwise, I do think after a couple of runs, this is going to be an absolute banger. The only thing I haven't done in this shoe yet is a longer run test. And I'll do that at some stage, but I'm not in a rush to do that because ultimately in 3-4 weeks time, I've got a half marathon. And so if this does well in this weekend's race and the following weekend where I've got a 10-mile race, then this one definitely could be my racing shoe. And if it is, that'll be a pretty decent long run test when it a half marathon. So we'll see how we get on there. But overall, absolutely, this gets the seal of approval. So I'd love to hear from you guys down in the comments below. Were you a Next Percent fan and now you're a Puma fan? Are you still stuck in the Next Percent era and looking for a replacement? Then I genuinely would recommend trying this. I've got no obligation to say that. I purchased the Puma with my own money, so I'm just saying exactly how I feel. If you feel the Next Percent works to you, I do recommend trying this if you're looking for a new trainer in the market, or even if you can grab an older pair of Endorphin Pro 3s, that would be another great suitable replacement. But I would genuinely love to hear how you've swapped over, if you have, or if you haven't tried this yet, and if you found this comparison useful. And if there's any other comparisons you'd like to see, please do drop a comment below and I'll make sure I'll add that to the list. So that's it from me today, guys. If you're interested in learning a little bit more about what Saucony have up their sleeve for 2025, then make sure you check out this video up here. And if you're interested in learning a little bit more about the Puma shoe that we just talked about, check out this video down here where I did a workout in them, and I'll see you over on those.